Hey guys, today we have our buddy Scott Jones on the podcast. We talk about shotgun patterns. So how shells pattern coming out of the gun, what the different shot size means in that equation, how chokes affect it, and ultimately what that means as far as knocking birds down. Hope you guys enjoy it. If you like the video, please leave us a thumbs up, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and definitely, whether you like it or hate it, leave us a comment so we know how to improve. Hope you guys have fun. Thanks. All right, so this is the Average Waterfowlers podcast. Today we have Scott Jones on joining us. He is part of the team, I guess, if you want to call it a team, just one of the only other guy that we hunt with, really, and kind of the resident expert for us on everything shooting-wise. And so we're going to talk about shotgun shells, ballistics, and patterns today. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
I appreciate it, Josh, and I think from here I can only let you down with such a optimistic introduction there. But I'll definitely be looking forward to going through this with y'all.
Yeah, right. It wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah, don't worry. Only like 8 people are going to see this, so it's really not that big of a deal. Yeah, I'm excited to have you on and talk about shells because that's been a big thing for me, trying to figure out over the past few years. I've always ended up back at the same shell, but it's not something I really understand, so I'm looking forward to kind of what you got for us. And how do you just kind of want to take it off from here, or any?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, I mean, just like from a hunting standpoint, my logic at becoming somewhat well versed with all this stuff is literally just, there's a lot of different variables in the equation of duck hunting, right? And the one that really determines success or failure ultimately is if you can hit a duck and kill it. And so to me, shooting, although it's not all about the trigger time, in fact, that's a very small part of the equation for me and certainly my passion there. If you can't do that right, most of the other things really don't matter very much, right? So I think understanding this stuff, and I think having an idea of, what you're running through your gun as far as shells, choke, shot size, size of the shell even. Ultimately, the goal as a duck hunter is to kill ducks, and if you can't do those things right, well then, to me, it's just everything else becomes not a waste of time, but maybe less important.
Right.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's just like, how many times have you been out hunting and it's like it comes down to that one split second, and you're like, damn it, you see your pattern in the water or something, and you're like, well, damn, that was like way tighter than I thought, or there's something that you didn't plan on, or didn't even know about yourself, or the different variables going on with your gun, where you're like, well, maybe that's why I missed it. And it wouldn't be the first time a duck hunter's questioned anything that he has in his setup or in his shooting. So
for sure,
the less things you leave up to question, ultimately, I think the more successful you can be. So.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And that's one of those things that I just kind of always relied on you to tell me what to shoot and throw it through. That's what I put in my gun. So I'm looking forward to understanding it a little bit better.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I hate speaking in generalities, but that's kind of what you have to do with this stuff, right? And I guess my disclosure before we get into some more detail is just like, there's an exception to every rule. There's an exception to every story with a different story. And, at risk of being wrong in any way, I know I already am. So, because that's part of what's cool about hunting, right? Is that, things happen out there that you don't plan for that are just fascinating and awesome. But that also means that the law of unintended consequences is always at play. And so, Anybody who wants to message in and talk about some golden BB story, that's fine, but that's not what we're really talking about today. So
There you go. Yeah. Fully noted.
Yeah. It's just like, old men get so caught up in that stuff. But so I guess the first thing I thought we'd talk about is just patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't even take for your average hunter a trip to the patterning board to understand what's going on. I mean, how many times, I know both of y'all, we've shot just into the water to be like, what's going on today with that, like, after you miss, or just out of curiosity, right? So like, cheap, easy solution is look out 30 yards and shoot the water. I mean,
right.
A lot of people don't think to do that, but it's a waste of $2 or $4 or whatever you're running, but that's a quick acid test.
It's a good one.
But a few fallacies, I think, with patterns, or maybe just blind spots that people don't realize, is that people look at a pattern as something that's doing this, and the reality is that it's also doing this, if that makes sense. And for those that are listening, the idea is that people think of a pattern as a two-dimensional circle. The reality is it's a three-dimensional sphere, and as a sphere, it's turning more ovular as it covers more distance, and what they call that is a shot string.
Right, like it's long more so than
Yep.
it is wide. Right.
Yep. So what that means is, and the implication there, and why it's important is, think about last time you're skeet shooting, you're at that middle station. A lot of people think that's typically the hardest, right? And just because it's the most lead. And so if you have a shot string that's really long because you're shooting the wrong choke, just the wrong BBs, and again, speaking in generalities, just not setting yourself up for success in that regard. Like a 410, for example, the 3-inch 410 shell is the worst patterning shell. Google it, or just trust me. But and that's because of the shot string. And so what that means is, if I'm shooting a perfect crossing shot, say in that middle station on a skeet range, there's the possibility and a probability that I could be on that clay or just behind it, and my shot's going to string out because it's traveling through time and space, right? That's why you lead a shot.
Right.
And so you could have just barely the wrong lead, and it's going to be very unforgiving because your BBs are stacked behind one another via a long shot string rather than spreading out kind of simultaneously. And so what that ultimately means is that your goal with your pattern is to basically have a combo that makes sense, right shot size, right choke tube, so that those BBs aren't bouncing off each other like that can happen with steel shot, so that they're closer together.
So you want to keep
more forgiving.
You want to keep the depth of the shot string fairly small?
Yep.
Okay.
So the idea is to keep, because think about it, right? Like if a bird's going by and I shoot and I just barely don't lead it enough, well, all my BBs are going to come in behind it.
Right.
Because that shot string, the pellets that are coming in further, or the pellets that are coming out of the barrel later, are going to get to that place later, which means they're all going to be coming in behind that bird.
Right.
And so the more close you have your shot string, the more forgiving it's going to be.
I've always wondered, though, if you overlead a bird, are you kind of gaining from that by it flying into the end of the shot string?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that...
or is it just too fast?
No. I mean, speed is always going to be a constant variable. With like the things that affect shot string are your forcing cone and your shotgun, and what they call the second forcing cone of the shotgun, but what that's more commonly referred to as your choke tube, right? And speed's going to be constant across, keeping the shell you're using constant. And the idea is that there's a right lead for every shot, right? And you pick up a 20 gauge, go to the skeet range or a sub gauge, and you learn where that lead is pretty quickly, right? And eventually, I think both y'all can attest, right? You get you develop an eye for, oh, it's kind of quartering away this way. That's an 8-inch lead. That's, just as an example. And you develop that, they talk about in big game hunting, that game eye. It's almost like a shooter's eye where
Right.
you can, Caleb, how many times have we looked at a duck and I'll be like, where'd you lead that? 3 feet? I thought it was 3 feet. And you'll be like, no, it's 2.5. I'm like, well, I missed it,
Yeah.
And there's just a specific lead for what you're shooting, and it varies a little bit between lead and steel, so range to duck hunting.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're trained to lead things correctly and you're shooting with a gun that has a poor shot string situation, well then, you're not really practicing for the big game in the right way. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah. Totally. Okay. Cool. So before
And killing less ducks when it is that time.
Right. Before we go, I kind of took us off on a little side note
wormhole.
there. Yeah, wormhole. So let's get back on target. So shot string, what's affecting the pattern tightness and things like that?
Great question. So the main thing that I think your average duck hunter maybe doesn't necessarily get wrong, but isn't aware about enough is shot size, right? And basically the idea. I know Caleb talked on it in an earlier podcast, but it's basically tee shot all the way up to 9 shot. 9 shot is typically only used for skeet shooting hand loader type folks because they want to have more BBs in the air. And tee shot being, your big goose hunt. So from 9 all the way down to 2 and then to tee, you're getting bigger.
Right.
And as pellets get bigger, obviously you are limited by your shotgun shell size. So as pellets get bigger, obviously it makes sense that there's going to be fewer of them in there, fewer opportunities to kill birds. And why you would sacrifice that is killing strength. And so when you have bigger BBs, your gun is just going to pattern more tightly. At risk of getting into the science and boring everyone to tears and possibly making myself look stupid, just take my word on that. But like seriously, so I would say an example would be, your 7-shot lead through a modified choke that you'd probably use skeet shooting.
Mm-hmm.
You use that same modified choke and shoot 2-shot steel. It's going to be coming out at a pattern that would be more similar to a full choke tube.
On the line.
And that is for 2 reasons. Like I said before, pellet size, 2 is way bigger than 7. Mm-hmm. But also steel is a harder metal and it's lighter. Mm-hmm. And so what that means is it's going to, as it comes through your barrel, it's not going to be malleable with the other BBs in there. They don't get along as well. Mm-hmm. And they're going to kind of just push together harder off that barrel. That's kind of my understanding. I know that's how it works. Mm-hmm. And so the idea there is that you're going to have a tighter pattern both with steel compared to lead, and then as you progress through bigger shot sizes.
Gotcha. Hey, I got a question. So when that shot is traveling down the barrel, you mentioned the first forcing cone.
Yep.
Where is that in your barrel? Is that like right at the beginning? Is the forcing cone like right near the breech, or is it near the end where the choke tube is?
Excellent question. So if you ever looked in your barrel, when you're cleaning it, right, there's that little shaved area where the shells can sit once it's locked and loaded. Just after that, if you look closely, it's almost like it does what a choke tube would be doing on the other side. So it's usually like 2 to, don't quote me specifically on this, but like 2 to 4 inches of space beyond that area where the shell sits.
So if you're gonna look at buying a gun, is that something you would take into consideration as the forcing cone?
I would say only if you're paying north of $1,000 for a gun. The reality is it's not something you have a choice over, really, right?
Right. Yeah.
You get into a Krieg off, then we can start talking about different forcing cone lengths. But I would say it's one of those things that's there's a lot going on there. It's easy to overthink and certainly not worth worrying about. But understanding that's going on, I'd say, is valuable. Beyond that, it's like,
Okay.
you go on Chuckhawks and read about different inch forcing cones and what they do to pellets. It's like, I'm not buying a different barrel because my forcing cone is a few centimeters too long or too short.
Yeah, I imagine it's pretty standardized across the majority of like duck hunting guns, I would think.
I would say, so here's an interesting, I guess, bit about that. So for a long time, all three of us were 870 guys. And, the beauty of that gun is the only time I've ever jammed it, I think I realized there was about a centimeter wide stick in my action. So cheap workhorse shotgun, but and that's great.
Caleb, watch your mic.
But I upgraded probably 6-7 years ago to a semi-auto Benelli Super Black Eagle 2. Mm-hmm. And I'd say it's the workhorse of semi-autos, and its forcing cone, I'm going to get this wrong. It's either longer or shorter than the 870. Mm-hmm. And with the same shell, same shot size, same choke tube, that Benelli is going to pattern tighter than my 870 would. And it's just, that's the difference. But literally, think about how many things I just said that were all the same for us to even notice. So, and again, it's a variable you can always control. I think you get a nicer gun, it's probably going to pattern a little better. Benelli's got that cryogenically frozen barrel. Mm-hmm. What that does, I don't know, but I think it patterns a little better too. So you kind of get what you pay for.
For sure. So you're talking about the larger shot size, but typically when duck hunting, I mean, that's not really the shot size that we're shooting. I mean, I don't know if you want to jump straight into that or talk like, because you're not shooting large tee shot. So
no.
Why would something with more pellet BBs in it potentially pattern worse? Because they're bouncing around off of each other inside of the barrel, right? Isn't that what's going on?
Yep. I would say the bouncing you definitely don't want. The quick way to get your pellets to bounce off each other with steel is to over choke your gun. You throw a full choke in with really large BBs. They bounce off each other, and actually your pattern's going to look like the backside of a school bus.
Yeah, they say like in the Benelli choke tubes, you can't shoot anything but lead out of the full. Or super full.
And that's exactly why. So the bouncing thing you almost would have to try or just be uninformed to do. But as far as for our listeners and recommendations and practical implications, I feel like we're kind of covering the extremes here. But like, I shoot 3-shot. What do y'all shoot? 3-shot.
3 to 4.
I mean, that's all around. I mean, there's definitely a few times where I'll have to shoot more than once at a goose, but I'm going to blame my shooting on that before I'll be like, it's the wrong shot size.
Right.
And for me, I just think, I think too, you're not getting as many chances. I think there's like 40 or 50 less pellets per 3-inch shell between a 2 and a 3. And the idea is that, at almost any distance, obviously we're not speaking of extremes here, you're going to have this 15-inch diameter circle called the core of your pattern. And that's always going to be there. And you can put more BBs in it with smaller pellets. But what you get with smaller pellets and more BBs is that area outside it, you don't have as many holes in it. So it's literally, I mean, think about going to Vegas and rolling the dice. You want to have the best odds possible.
Right.
And the best way you can do that to an extent is to have more BBs in there. Now, I'm not saying get 7-shot and just let it rip, but if you're making shots inside 30 yards, I mean, you can use 5, you can use 4.
Mm-hmm.
I like 3 because I shoot outside that, and I feel good about it inside that.
Right.
And so it's just understanding what your average shot distance is and how to set yourself up for success the most often.
So I was shooting sporting clays last weekend, and I was at this shotgun club, and I was talking to the owner, and he's saying that he's a big hunter. He was saying that he shoots 2 3/4 inch shells over 3 because he's like he shoots.
He thinks the pattern's better.
He thinks it patterns better because there's less BBs bouncing around off of each other. Even though he's shooting 3-shot, and
was he talking specifically about steel?
Yeah, for steel, for steel. And I don't know. I mean, I was just wondering. I wanted to get your thoughts on that and see what you thought about it. He's like, shoot a 3-inch shell and then shoot a 2 3/4 inch shell. And he's like, I guarantee you every time the 2 3/4 inch is going to shoot better when he's in a hunting situation as well.
If that guy told me that, what I would ask him is, what does he mean by better, right?
Yeah.
You're going to get more BBs with a 3-inch. So we can put that in the pro side of reasons for doing the 3-inch. Is the pattern going to be more uniform with fewer holes in it with a 2 3/4? Definitely. And the reason is speed. With that 1/4 inch difference, the 2 3/4 is going to be going slower. And anytime you can have your pellets traveling slower, your pattern is going to be better. And that's what he's referring to about the bouncing.
That makes sense.
But, to touch on something that's like the end all be all, most important part about killing ducks and your loads and everything, kinetic energy, right?
Right.
And without trying to remember my high school physics education, the long and short of it is, you've got mass times velocity.
Yeah.
It might be squared. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But you got 2 inputs to this 1 output, which is energy, and that's how you kill ducks. And so to the guy who's saying 2 3/4 patterns better. Well, it might from a uniformity standpoint, but those BBs are going slower and there's less mass. And so there's definitely less kinetic energy.
I agree.
So my question is, like, I know you don't shoot 3.5, but I know people that say, I shoot a 3.5 at a duck.
Yeah.
What's the reason? And I don't shoot it either. What's your reasoning for not shooting it? A 3.5.
I actually go back and forth on that, and I think it's because we repress memories that are bad as human beings, and I think recoil is on that list of repressed memories, right?
Yeah.
And
that's my response.
yeah, and it's like do 3.5 inch guns pattern worse than 3-inch? Would say my opinion there's a studied one, and no, they don't. I'd say they've got more BBs in the air. Your pattern's not any less dense. If anything, it's more dense. And they do the shot charge a little different, so that once you go past 3 inches, you're not really gaining speed. Like a 3-inch heavy metal, which I shoot, is going to go the same speed as a 3.5 inch.
Right.
I might be wrong by 50 feet per second, but again, that's what's on the box, and every shell is going to be probably different by 50 feet per second anyway. So for me, it's recoil, man. It's that follow-up second shot. I mean, great example was this past duck season, the first half. Caleb here was shooting the hypersonic, and I remember he turned to me one day in the blind, and he was like, dude, your follow-up shot is so fast. He's like, how do you do that? And like nothing about me over here has changed whatsoever. I didn't like all of a sudden, sit down with Tom Knapp and have 10 hours worth of shotgun shooting instruction. But Caleb was shooting those hypersonics. They're 17 feet per second shells. Physics is, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, which in that case was Caleb's shoulder.
Right.
And so his follow-up shot was slow.
Yeah.
Compared to me, who's shooting a shell that was going 1,500. So you wouldn't think it makes a difference, but I tend to think that once you push past 1,500, 1,550, like a Kent Fast Steels, I believe, you're not it's like diminishing marginal returns, I would say.
Gotcha. I agree 100% with that. I think that's a good segue, though. It's like a great segue point because we started talking about brands. I mean, well, actually, no, I'll let you keep on going. Keep rolling with what you got.
As far as patterns go?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say the last fallacy, I think, that you see a lot of Bubbas out there, they get all caught up in this whole deal of type pattern.
Right?
Y'all heard it. It's like you see this dude with an extended choke tube on there. I'm one of them, but and it's just like, man, I got my extra full screwed in, and it's like, okay, what is that doing for you, right? And you always hear it. It's like I've got big BBs, I've got this tight choke tube, and I'm gonna kill ducks at 80 yards, right?
Right.
And it just doesn't work like that. I mean, I think everyone on this podcast right now has probably shot a duck at 80 yards, and sure as hell wasn't shooting 2-inch or 2-shot shells with a full choke in, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Can't do it. And so I just think if to your average waterfowler, it's easy to be in the aisle at Bass Pro and hear some guy talking about ammo, and all of a sudden be like, oh, if bigger's better and tighter is going to make it tighter further.
Right.
But that's a game that only works so much, and I think modified, improved cylinder, 3 or 4 shot, and you're going to set yourself up for success the most.
So what do you think you gain from a aftermarket choke?
Well, let's go into that
Great
later.
question.
Let's stay in the ammo range.
Okay.
Cool.
All right.
Why don't y'all share what ammo you use? What are you going to use this season, Caleb? So some background there. I'd say we all had some frustrating moments last season in the duck blind. Me, probably more than anyone, both monetarily and from a lack of sleep standpoint. But Caleb, what are you going to shoot this season?
Probably Black Cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Josh?
I would like to go to heavy metal, but there's just not a lot of bang coming out of there for your buck.
I just ordered another flat of heavy metal.
Oh man, I hope we kept the receipt.
Did you ever write them an email?
I did a couple seasons ago. I didn't write them one this time. I didn't know, like, what do you say, right?
Yeah, your shells don't shoot.
What are they gonna do? Send me a coupon? Like, I don't know. You just kind of feel grimy.
Yeah, I get that.
It's not like you got them wet, right?
Yeah, well, so some background there, right? Caleb is going to shoot Black Cloud. Josh, you're going to stay with the Black Clouds too, I assume?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's just, like, I get the lacerated pellets thing. Does that hurt your pattern? Not as far as I can tell. I think they're great shells. I think, though, if I'm not shooting heavy metal, I'm shooting Kent Fast Steel, or I'm shooting Black Clouds, and it's basic steel, right? So, I mean, you're getting the least bang for your buck from a killing standpoint, but those shells, I've never seen one not go boom.
Yeah.
Bottom line, ever. And, this last season and the season before, it's like heavy metal's just not been making its quality of product. I mean, how many times did I say I was going to start reloading my own shells?
Yeah. You had a lot of fizzles last season.
Oh, my God. I think I've talked to a bunch of reloaders about it. I think what happens there when you pull the trigger, reload it, pull the trigger, and nothing happens, the primer gets seated too deep in the brass there.
Okay.
So it's not, your pin's not hitting it.
your pin is not hitting the primer, as best I could tell. Because I mean, y'all can attest. I mean, I had my shells in a dry bag, and that was like, doing everything but tucking them in at night to make sure that they went bang.
Yeah.
So you think it's like just a quality control issue from them making the brass?
Yeah, I think it's just like any manufacturing plant, there's what's called I forget the technical term, but like waste, right?
There's margins of error that are like typically
Exactly.
accepted, right? And so you want to be like, if it, I don't know, but maybe it's like 0.001 millimeter and 0.003, and if it falls on 0.003, it's kind of on the I don't know if it's going to go boom, but it still makes it in, and they've got like
Yep.
some sort of laser measuring that as they're going through the assembly line. And then the rest of
And
it
then
will
even
cost.
from like a financial modeling standpoint, like on that company's balance sheet, they're going to say, 2% of all production is waste. So
Right.
they plan for it.
Right.
But unfortunately, then it gets in our hands through poor quality control.
Yeah.
But,
I find it interesting that you're still shooting them after
well,
those
dude,
issues.
I mean, I'll share some numbers with you that just like to me are the reason. So the way, and this is, again, I'm not an expert here. I know my numbers are right, and it goes back to the kinetic energy thing.
Okay.
Mass, velocity.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no matter which of those three brands I just listed, we're roughly going to be shooting the same velocity. So the only thing we can change is mass. And if we're all shooting 3 shot size, well, that's the same volume of metal.
Right.
Right? So then it becomes density that's important. Well, they measure density in grams per cubic centimeter. It doesn't matter, but that just gives you reference for these numbers. And so steel is 7.8 grams per cubic centimeter. What does that mean? Very little, but it gives us a point of comparison. Lead is 11.1 grams per cubic centimeter. That's 42% more dense.
Right.
Think about it. And so when you see shells that are advertising, like heavy shot that are saying they're denser than lead, that means you're shooting something that's 50% more dense. I mean, that's 50%. I guess it's a multiplier. It's 25% more killing power going downrange.
Right.
So that's the difference between getting hit with like a 100-pound dumbbell and a 50-pound dumbbell, basically.
Yeah, I mean,
going the same speed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now you don't have to know much about like riflery, right, to understand that like your 180 grain 30-06 bullet and your 120 grain bullet, like those things drop completely different and kill deer in a completely different way, right? And that's probably pretty close to a 42% difference.
Yeah.
So like it really, that's a huge amount.
Right.
I mean, and having been lucky enough to go to Argentina in my life, down there they shoot lead at ducks. They don't have the Clean Water Act, which I'm not going to get into. And I was shooting 7-shot at ducks at 30, 40, even 50 yards. And it was like, you hear old men talking about it, but it's
different.
You didn't need 3. I was shooting 2 3/4 7-shot, and just smoking ducks in ways that I'd never seen.
Yeah.
And that's when I got going on this research with the density deal, and that's really why the heavy metal to me makes a difference, because it's the same price point, because it's only half of that heavy shot stuff, and then steel like y'all are throwing out there.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just, it's gonna kill more ducks, man.
Yeah. If
Provided it goes boom.
Yeah, provided it goes boom. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna stick.
You want me to run through these other numbers about this stuff?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Just to give you an idea, the best you can do is federal heavyweight, 15 grams per cubic centimeter. So it's almost, we'll call it 2 times steel density. And then you got like products that are out there, Kent tungsten matrix, like those, like, basically if the shells are sold in a 10-round box, you're going to be doing pretty good on that density game, but not so well in your wallet.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's perfect. I don't even know what's in Black Cloud. I have no idea. I guess it's steel. That fast.
It's steel.
Yeah, I didn't know if there's some bismuth in
But
there.
what it is they've got that serrated edge on some of those steel pellets, so it's like Odd Job's hat in James Bond.
Yeah, I got you. Cool. So yeah, we kind of talked about the shells that we shoot. I was just sticking with the Black Cloud simply because it just seems to be the one that works for me. Like
Yeah.
I think it's a quality product.
Yeah.
It is. Let me ask you this, and I hear this a lot, and you know me, like when I shoot a duck, I kind of look at it and I'm like, all right, where'd I hit it?
Mm-hmm.
How bad does it look like I did this guy in, kind of thing? Just because I'm, I am a student of shooting, and I think that you got to study that stuff. But I've heard people say, and I haven't researched this one because I just haven't gone down the Black Cloud road, but I've heard people say that when you shoot a duck, sometimes with Black Cloud, those serrated pellets just like wipe the feathers off it.
Yeah.
Y'all ever seen that?
Yeah.
Taking some if it's close, because that wad just keeps everything in for so long.
Dude, I'm actually a huge fan of federal ammunition because of what that wad did to that pheasant.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
The Prairie Storm?
Yeah, I shot a pheasant and found the wad inside of its cavity, its chest cavity. And it wasn't like a close shot.
No, it was like a solid 35 yards probably.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. I was like cleaning it and I was like, oh my God, what did this thing eat?
I
pulled it out.
I've got a picture of that. I'll post it on the end of the podcast.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
I feel like that's almost more the Indian than the arrow, right? Like you had to have been spot on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went straight up that thing's butthole.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, kind of, what are we recommending to guys on shotgun shells? What's your recommendation, Scott?
Y'all can disagree with me on this, but I think it's one of those things where you get what you pay for the most part. And so figure out what you want to pay per box. There's basically, as far as I can tell, low, medium, and high as far as price points. You've got like the sub $20. You got that kind of $20 to $35 deal, and then you've got the, downtown daddy deal. Paying $40 for 10 shotgun shells. Now, does that kill more ducks than the sub $20 deal? Absolutely, 110% of the time. But you're going to die penniless. So
yeah,
food for thought. So yeah, I'd say all three of us fall in that like $20 to $35 range, right? And so you got options in there. You got the Kent, like we talked about. You got the Black Cloud, and you've got the heavy metal, right?
Yeah.
What's heavy metal run at? Like $27?
It depends. I'll buy it by the flat, get free shipping, and that'll usually cost me $24 a box. Okay. You buy it at Bass Pro during the duck season, I think you're going to be up towards that $35 range, which is why I kind of said that middle range is so wide, because I think price fluctuates depending on how savvy you are about procuring it.
Yeah, for sure. I fall into I like buy a couple boxes every week category during duck season, which is stupid.
Yeah. You're always like, oh.
I want to share like my ammo secret, but then I'm worried like they might be sold out next season. You know what I mean? Should we tell them about the spot? I'd say most hunters probably know about those guys, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
Is
Yeah,
that?
so
Like,
Rogers Sporting Goods.
Yeah.
It's actually funny. I usually read Max Prairie Wings when I'm taking a dump, and I was reading it this morning, and they are offering free shipping now in ammo too. So
it's fun. It's funny you say that, Scott, because like if they have more than 50 flats at Rogers, you'll probably be okay.
No, man. I think they just had
it's
a.
only a limited time deal, man, and it changes your price per box on 250 shells, so 10 boxes from like $29 to like $24.
Yeah, so you're saving like 40
It's
or 50
$50
bucks.
difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree.
All right. Let's move on.
Cool. Let's see. Should we talk about, before we move on, should we talk about shells that just absolutely suck?
We should absolutely talk about that. We've
Yeah.
touched on it before, but we should definitely touch on the sucky ones, just because it's fun.
Why don't we just have like a little sharing deal? Like each of us can share a different shitty shell that they've shot that just sucked.
Okay.
You lead it off.
I shot the dry locks for like the first 3 years of my duck hunting career, and I blew out a barrel with one. So I
forgot about that.
It might have been user error, and I might have done something stupid, like put the gun in the barrel.
The choke tube came unscrewed and a BB went under there?
Yeah, maybe, but I just don't think that's what happened. I think it was that shell. And like this freaking cloud of smoke came out of the gun afterwards. I was so shocked because I was in a layout blind when it happened, and I pull up to shoot this duck, and it like knocks me back into the layout blind. The duck is still alive, flying off, and I mean I was basically concussed, and I had a blown out barrel. I was like, "What just happened?" So yeah,
I remember seeing that barrel.
I still have
there
it.
though.
I still have it.
It like bulged out. It was like the choke tube had expanded, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was like right there. It was like kind of where it would be kind of forced down from the choke. Maybe the choke tube was a little unscrewed and a BB hit. I just don't see that like happening from one or two BBs hitting like the edge of a thread.
It would have to be like so unscrewed that like you couldn't have been that negligent to have not noticed. I would think.
Yeah,
I think so too. I think it was just like those BBs were just basically like a brick, like basically together. You know, like just one solid piece.
A poorly formed slug just came out.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think it was. 100%. I don't know.
You shoot any dry locks ever again?
I was so poor back then. I probably did shoot dry locks after that. Not since then. I've been shooting the black clouds since they came out.
Yeah.
Back when they had the duck commander. I guess they still have the duck commander on it, but yeah, I like Federal. And another thing is that Federal's like so large, such a large company, and their distribution channels are so wide that it's always on the shelves, even at the end of the duck season. You know, I like that about it, so I can stay consistent.
Yeah. Caleb, remember last year dove hunting when we shot the Winchester lead shot versus Federal? We shot way better the day when we used Federal.
Yeah, it was way better.
I think they like Josh said, there's economies of scale that they bring to bear. Better product for the same amount of money.
Yeah.
I agree. What's your least favorite, Caleb?
That Winchester blindside. I think it's so stupid. It's the Winchester blindside with the square BBs, so they can stack it in there better.
It doesn't even make sense. It's like physics and aerodynamics.
Well, it's the idea that they can put more BBs in a shell because they're stacked on top of each other.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There's just no way that comes out of a barrel right.
Yeah.
No, it's like, I mean, in any sport that we know of, I mean, Olympics are going on right now. they're not throwing. No one. Tiger Woods doesn't line up to the tee and hit like a dice. He hits.
That's true.
It's like a volleyball isn't like this, square thing. I guess it'd be pointing to hurt your hand. But other than that, it'd just be dumb, right?
Square edges, I feel like they're just going to be like curving out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't make
I
sense.
mean, maybe if they put dimples on it like a golf ball, but it's not spinning anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's dumb. What about you, Scott? Which is your least favorite?
Oh, that's tough. I will say this. Last dove season, Brian was shooting blindside, like 3-shot. This is, by the way, the land we leased, the landowner's son, a great dude. But he was trying to use up his duck loads. And, he was hitting doves, and they were laughing at him. That stuff. You remember that, Caleb? He would shoot him, and it would be like a pillowcase. A pillow exploded, and then, through the cloud of feathers, the dove would be flying off.
This naked dove would be like...
Yeah.
Ooh, that was close.
It's like, thanks. It was really hot out, man.
Yeah.
I would say... dude, the Winchester experts are pretty bad. I've shot ducks with that before, where it was you could see my wad going out, and it was a good shot, not to pump my own tires, and you could see the pattern hit this bird, and it was just a quarter of a second went by where its wing stopped, and I was like, yeah, I hit that, and then it was yeah, you did, but it didn't hurt, and it just kept flying. I was
I've seen the Winchester expert, someone pull the trigger on one of those, and I've seen what looks like confetti. Come out of the barrel, and you're like, what is this, a party favor? What's going on here?
Yeah. I've seen that twice with those.
Yeah, you're like...
That's hysterical.
I don't know
the duck
what
flies off and yells surprise. That's what happens.
Yeah.
I'd say we that runs the gamut. The only other thing I'll say is so Remington's cheap brand, the Nitro Steel. That stuff's it's cheap. I think you can even have that for in the right situation under $10 a box. But
Caleb was shooting that. Caleb. You're shooting the hypersonics.
The hypersonic, yeah. So hypersonics, they're high end. There's some mid range deal, and then there's the Nitro Steel.
Wait, did we just crap on Winchester? Every single one of their shells.
Yeah, we did crap on all.
No, they have an HD line that is 10 shell boxes. That's you can fold ducks at long distances.
Dude, those, I think everything Winchester makes just laughs at animals, because we shot that deer 7 times in the pumping station with those Winchester rounds.
Yeah, I don't know what those were, but again, I think, and when I look back at all the situations where I bought their stuff, and this relates great to your average waterfowler, their boxes of ammo look cool most of the time.
Yeah.
So you're in the aisle and you're oh, let's try something new, and you're oh, what do these square pellets do? Or I don't remember what those deer rounds said on them, but I remember that box looked cool as hell.
Instead of brass, it had silver casings.
It was silver. Yeah,
you're this is going to be awesome.
And then the bullet was it was black, which was probably a composite of garbage.
Yeah.
With a gray ballistic tip. It looked cool as hell. Couldn't kill a damn thing. I think that's their deal, man. I think the dollars that go into quality control and just putting out a good product go into marketing instead. That's what things happening there.
Sounds about
right.
Yeah,
that still sucks. That stuff sucks too, the Remington.
Yeah. Caleb had an issue with that, which we talked about before, but basically... the recoil was, I guess, messing up the timing of his gun, and what was it doing? Short loading?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was stovepiping stovepiping and then are double feeding.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Which makes
I
me
looked
think
into that, and it goes back to our physics conversation from earlier, right? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Your shoulder, but what's between your shoulder and that controlled explosion is that spring in the stock of your Benelli, and those things are designed to handle a range of force, from a light, sporting clays round to your heavy magnum loads. But that heavy magnum load at 1,700 feet per second coming back into your shoulder as well, it's pushing that string or that spring past where it actually compresses to push the right amount forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's why I was thinking the timing was off because as it's coming back, a shell is getting ejected out of the tube, and then the lever or the what's that thing on the bottom?
The feeder.
The feeder is pushing it up, and then you've got that's what's supposed to happen, but it was just like two were coming out of the tube and pushing one up, and the other one wasn't getting thrown out all the way.
Was it because it was just too fast?
Yeah. Or like it's going
analogy
back so far. It's not. It's taking longer to come
that's
forward.
what's going on.
Yeah.
The best analogy is think about when you were a kid and you had a slinky, right? And you hold it that 8 inches apart, and it can kind of give every direction. Well, then compress that slinky all the way, and it can't do anything from there, right? It's just stacked on top of itself. That's basically what's happening at the end of the butt inside your inside that spring part of your gun there. So it's compressed to a point where it's not gonna spring back.
Right. I wonder if
it's not getting that shell right.
Right. I wonder if it's better in gas guns.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably pretty good in the Versamax. At least you'd hope so.
Do people shoot those?
Versamax?
Yeah. No.
Will used to.
Our buddy Will used to shoot a Versamax, and he liked it.
Yeah, I think people like them.
Yeah.
I held it. I didn't like the way it felt.
Yeah.
Felt weird to me.
Hey, also, while we're on ammo, having, probably developed my first few gray hairs last year in the duck blind about ammo, and then doing a bunch of research on reloading for those people that, or you say you're, just getting into it waterfowl that actually know a little bit about reloading. That game is with duck loads, the raw materials cost is basically priced in on reloading the same way it would be on buying it on the shelf. So you're not going to save money unless you are like a professional guide. It's a quality control. So for those of you out there that are thinking about reloading, don't expect to save money by doing it, because that's not the reason you go down that avenue. So
just kind of something you better be into. Yeah.
Yeah, you better enjoy it. And I mean, you're going to not be me and have deep-seated primers and click on greenheads,
Right.
But it's not going to be any cheaper, especially with the fixed cost of all that equipment if you don't already have it.
Let's talk about chokes.
Well, broadly speaking, or recommendations, what do you want to start off with?
I would say we should probably explain chokes for the guy that just is brand new and doesn't understand it.
Awesome. To put it in as simple and easy to understand terms as possible, the pellets travel down your barrel, out the muzzle, and go down range, right? And you look at older shotguns; a lot of them don't have choke tubes. There'll be a fixed constriction point at the end. And what a choke enables you to do is control what we talked about earlier, the rate at which those pellets spread out, and just generally speaking, how tight they are as they come out of that muzzle. And so, you go into it's a bit of a wormhole because as far as it relates to duck hunting, your modified or improved cylinder, I think, is all you need.
Right.
Improved cylinder for closer shots. Modified is going to get you out pretty far if you're using the right shot size.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's literally just, the choke controls the spread of your pattern, to put it in as simple terms as possible.
Cool. So you have what are the different choke tubes that you have? You have improved cylinder, modified.
Yeah.
Full
So
choke.
say you're getting into duck hunting and you buy a shotgun and it comes with 3 choke tubes. Or if you're buying a, Benelli or something, it's going to come with 5. What it's going to come with is you're going to get a full choke in there. You're going to get a modified choke. You're going to get an improved cylinder choke, and then you're going to get either a skeet or cylinder. And so the way I just went about that is getting more and more open. So full is going to be tightest. Modified is going to be kind of your middle. I think the most all-around choke tube for any and all applications as far as wing shooting goes. But I do like improved cylinder, which is a little more open because, as we talked about earlier, steel pattern's tighter.
Right.
So if you're trying to replicate what you're doing shooting sporting clays with steel, you're going to be shooting that improved cylinder is going to be like shooting probably lead through a modified, if that makes sense.
Right. And okay, so you explained the size differences. Do you I know we've all shot the extended choke tubes with the ports and all of that. What's the advantage of having an extended choke tube?
I would say tangible. Let me talk about it in 2 ways. I think there's tangible advantages, and then we'll call it this intangible advantages I haven't figured out yet, but I believe it to be true.
Okay.
And so the tangible advantages are those ports are letting gas escape. Your rifle shooter knows of the idea of a ported barrel on a rifle. It's going to reduce that recoil on the rifle. And now, those serious trap ski shooters, they'll get their barrels ported, but you can do that more cheaply, say $60 and all the way down to $30 for a real cheap one. You can get that ported choke tube. It's going to allow gas to escape before the shot charge exits the barrel, and that's going to reduce felt.
Gotcha. And you shoot an extended modified, right? Mostly?
Yeah, I'll shoot earlier in the season. I'll shoot extended kicks, improved cylinder. It's just more forgiving, I've noticed. And it does. I don't think it limits you too much as far as distance. What I do think, and this goes back to that pattern core idea, it kills ducks better when you get that tighter modified. And so as soon as I feel a little bit more dialed in after, say, the first week of the season, I'll screw that modified in, and I'll start hitting ducks a lot harder. And so the other, I forgot to touch on it, but the other tangible benefit of those choke tubes, whether it's on the packaging and untrue or not, and it's just a marketing ploy, I believe it is. And you see a lot of pretty well-educated shooters using extended chokes, so I would say, this is a tangible benefit, and that's that your pattern is going to be more uniform. Why a $60 cylindrical piece of metal makes your pattern more uniform when you screw it in the end of your barrel, I couldn't even begin to go into that with you.
Right.
But I've seen the difference. And then so the intangible is
I think it makes sense, and the reason why is because there's two things that I've got there, and this is just me talking about efficiency of rounds, right? The longer something is inside of the barrel, the more of that powder you're using up before it leaves the barrel, right? So, for instance, the most efficient thing that you want. Like the most efficient round is a round that is in the barrel just long enough to burn up all the powder, but not in the barrel past burning up the powder. So you're not, so like a lot of your boom isn't escaping once the barrel's out, the bullet's out of the barrel. The other thing I think it does too is like you got to remember that like a shot string is not just doing this. As it goes out, it's also doing this, right? Mm-hmm. So the longer you keep it in your barrel and keep it focused and centered, the less it's going to do that as you go out.
All right.
And that's super important from, again, the energy standpoint, because when the pellets are traveling closer together, they're, it's like NASCAR with drafting, right? The cars stack up on each other, and the cars behind, can go actually faster than those in front of them. And so you deliver more energy when those pellets are stacked up like that. So that's a great point.
That makes sense.
But my intangible, which is extremely important, and Caleb's borne witness to this. You remember that time we're in our main hole, and I was literally like, I'd shot a few ducks that day, and they'd crippled, whatever. And I screwed in that modified extended ported choke, and 2 mergansers flew over. We were having a slow day, so obviously we were going to shoot at them. And I remember, like distinctly, you might not, but I remember shooting them, and they were like 45, 50 yards, and both of them looked like Mike Tyson ran up and punched him in the face.
Yeah.
And I'd been shooting the same shell all day. I didn't feel like I'd put any better or worse shot on them, but it was just like it was like I just screwed a turbo booster into my shotgun. So that's the intangible to me. Why that is, I've seen it many times personally. So that's why I always shoot a ported choke. I think it just hits birds harder.
Gotcha. Makes sense. And you like the kicks choke, right?
I like the kicks choke. It's $60. You're not throwing, north of a C note out there for a choke tube like you would with a pattern master. I think those are like $100, $110.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not spending $100 on a cylindrical piece of metal, but for some reason I'm dumb enough to spend $60.
I was shooting the kicks extended modified out of my 870, and for a long time I really liked it. And now I shoot the A5. I have the Invector DS chokes for that or whatever, but I think this year I'm going to switch to the kicks modified and give it a shot.
Yeah, I think it's a good call. I think it's money well spent.
Yeah.
And I will say another thing about that. I've been skeet shooting and had like the regular cryo Benelli chokes in there and just like screwed in that, kicks extended ported deal. Mm-hmm. And like I'll instantly notice that I can actually hear a difference when I hit clays. Like it'll literally, I'll hear the impact and it'll be harder.
Really?
So that's also what sold me on it. Yeah, sometimes you can like hear
I can't hear
the
shit.
impact. Yeah. Well, Caleb, for us non-deaf people out there, no, I've noticed that. Like, on those longer shots on the skeet field, I'll like shoot and I'll be like, damn, like it really made a loud noise when I hit that clay.
Huh.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
Yeah.
I've never even shot an extended choke while shooting skeet. I'm always shooting my regular, I guess, improved cylinder mostly.
Yeah, I'll screw that improved cylinder kicks in when I'm shooting skeet. I don't think it helps or hurts. I mean, we're not trying to reduce recoil or anything, but
right.
So I do it.
That's pretty cool. Cool, man. So, I think we've kind of covered a lot of it, right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
I don't know if that made any sense, if that was intelligible or not. Digestible. I hope it did.
I'd say the word intelligible doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I caught that coming out of my brain. I've been in meetings all day today, so my brain is pretty fucking warped. But yeah, I think it was pretty good. The content was there for sure, so I think that was a a good. Hopefully, it'll help some people out. Caleb he wore this long sleeve shirt last week, and he's making up for it with his sleeveless.
Yeah, I'm
tank.
trying to look huge today.
It didn't help. It didn't help at all.
It's like
You
so
just look like a
skinny.
hipster.
So skinny. I'm a hipster hunter.
Hipster hunter.
The
Oh, man.
the average hipster hunter.
The average hipster. Get your.
I'm also a barista in my spare time as well.
I was just gonna come at you with a coffee joke, but
Yeah, I was gonna go the Uber route.
It's funny.
You could be an Uber Eats driver, so you're still in the food service industry, as the hipsters tend to be prone to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Delivering organic vegan tacos.
To
By
somebody
the way,
who eats-
that Carnivore Club on the Meat Eater podcast, signed up for it, got my first box yesterday,
How is it?
and dude, I honestly was like really worried I was gonna get like an envelope with like an ounce of like jerky in it for like $50, but it's actually really cool.
Really?
Yeah. I got like this piece of summer sausage that's like this.
Mhm.
I've never even heard of this before, but like those like Baby Bell cheese things or like the top of a Maker's Mark bottle, that
Mhm.
wax.
Mhm.
That's what the casing is for the summer sausage.
Really?
That like red wax stuff.
Huh? Is it good?
And then I haven't eaten it yet, dude. I literally like crashed when I went to sleep last night, but I got that and like 4 bags of like probably like 6 or 8 ounces of beef jerky, different flavors, and then like these like they look like teeny weenies, but they're like clearly really really nice ones. And
some
it's like
Vienna
2
sausages.
Like, yeah, it's like the premium Vienna sausage,
Man.
but it's like 2 boxes of 4 of those. So it's probably like it's not like they're ripping you off like what they're giving you for what you're paying.
Mhm.
I don't think.
How much you pay? How much did you
It's
pay?
$50 for a box.
Dude, that high-end beef jerky is expensive. I know, like at Whole Foods, they have like the stuff there, and it's like $13 for like a little bit of beef jerky.
Really?
Yeah.
They've got this Vietnamese market on the other side of the river down here.
Mhm.
When we went there, and they give you this beef jerky in like a plastic bag. They just tie it up and give it to you. It's pretty cheap, but it's very, very good.
Really?
It's because it's dog.
Well,
Might have to edit that one out. Sorry, Harris.
Just think about how you led into that story, though. You were like, I went across the river to this, like you weren't setting it up like it was going to be
like a high-end establishment.
premium product.
Went across the river under the bridge next to the crack dealer.
I'm sure.
He's calling out his dog's name because he can't find it for the past 5 days.
8-Ball, where are you? Oh.
Yeah, 8-Ball.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to shoot this 3D course on Saturday in Canton. It's $10 all day. You can shoot all
Really?
day. Yeah.
Canton, Georgia?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Dude, I love 3D. It's like golf with bows and arrows.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I watched this other podcast last night. It's got this guy from Iron Mind shooting or something, and he's like this SWAT instructor. And basically he has this philosophy about shooting, and it's that the entire time when you're shooting, especially with a bow and arrow, it applies to like handguns and rifles as well, but when you're shooting, your body knows that there's about to be some sort of controlled explosion. And so the entire time, even though with like the idea of like shooting back tension, where you're supposed to have a surprise shot so that you're not putting input into the shot, that you're doing what's called impact bracing. And so he has like this whole philosophy of like creating a mantra and talking to yourself while you're shooting. and I went out and shot today and just kind of tried what he was talking about. And my group went from like that at 40 to like that. Like,
No kidding.
yeah, dude, it was insane. Like at 40, like I'll shoot like that pretty well between 40 and 50, but every once in a while I'll have an outlier. It's like a outside, and I didn't have an outlier all day today. I shot for like an hour and a half, and I was just shooting like that. And it was all like just by creating a mantra and basically talking yourself through the shot and using like, it's so Zen hippie-ish, but like using like positive language, you're taking your mind off of the impact brace, so you're not going to subconsciously be trying to grab the bow. He's like if you take slow motion footage of archers that are shooting, like the majority of archers, even though they're trying to keep their hand open and they're not trying to grab that riser before the shot, if they're not shooting a surprise release, he said 100% of the time the hand grabs the bow before the actual shot goes off. And so
that makes sense.
That's causing some sort of deflection. And
that's what they teach in golf, dude. It's like your pre-shot routine is all about focusing on positives, because then you can't. I know it's completely different, but like it's similar in a sense that like you're controlling what your mind is doing so that it can't screw up in that other way.
Yeah,
you don't mean actually talking to yourself, right?
No, you're actually thinking. Like kind of. Well, in a hunting situation, you're probably thinking it, but
Josh's neighbor's like looking over the fence, like, this guy's crazy.
No,
wow, he's a really good shot, though.
His name's Daryl. He lives behind me, and he's been tuning his crossbow, getting ready for deer season. He's like, man, I keep on hearing you talk to yourself, because like I started the sequence, and I was like, it's like I started off as like knock an arrow, and I'm just talking myself through my shot sequence. So it's knock an arrow, hand, because you want to apply tension. So I'm like going through this whole thing, level the bubble. And then pull, because you're trying not to hit the trigger. You're wrapping your finger around the trigger, and you're pulling and just trying to move your elbow back, and then eventually your finger is gonna squeeze the trigger. And so yeah, he was like, I hear you're talking to yourself over there. So that actually did happen.
Dude, I was listening to that Aaron Snyder guy, and he was saying that that like he knows people that have forgot to knock an arrow.
Yeah.
From target panic.
Yeah.
And it's like, how?
Target panic's extreme, man. Like so the best hunters, like some of the best big country hunters go through it. They're not so much to the point where they forget to, like some guys will like put the knock on the string but not fully knock the arrow. Or they talk about guys that are like super experienced hunters all of a sudden being like, I don't know what I did. I don't know. And they'll be like, did you look through the peep? What pin did you put on? I don't know. I have no idea. And it like just is, especially in archery, it's like there's so much pressure on getting it up close to a big animal. You get like one shot a season, and
I
guys
think,
just freak out.
Dude, I think what it is like they're not training for what.
Yeah. I think we lost Caleb.
If you don't, you got me.
Yeah, you're kind of broken up a little bit, but you're coming back in.
Okay, so like if you don't train, like you're gonna go out and kill an animal. If you're just training to stick an arrow into a target, your mind's not going to be ready for what's about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're training to be under stress, and you're training like you would in a situation where your breathing is elevated, you're not going to, like, you're going to be able to control where your mind goes, what your body does, and all that stuff. It'll never be perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, I mean, it's kind of like you'd be surprised what happens when you train a certain way, and then all of a sudden it's the real deal.
Yeah, I do that 3 times a week. I do like different circuits, and then in between each circuit, I shoot an arrow. So like I'll do like 50 burpees, and then I'll do it up in my driveway, and then I have to run down the hill, and then I at 30 yards, I take a shot, I run back up the hill, and then I'll run to the end of the street, run back, come down, shoot an arrow. And I try not to let my heart rate go down. I'm trying to keep my heart rate elevated. So I'm like breathing hard. I have to slow myself down. I have to focus on the shot. But the interesting thing with archery is like target panic, where it really comes in, is guys focus on the pin so much, and they're like trying to time when the pin is coming across the spot that, like, if you just hold up your bow without having an arrow nock and having it drawn back, and you try to put your pin on target, it'll just go there, and you'll be able to hold it there. But when you have your bow drawn back, and you're like looking through your peep and through your sight housing, a lot of guys are like their pins like moving around, and right as it gets to where they want, they're like boom, and they're putting all kinds of input into that shot, and that's actually target panic. Not being able to hold that pin steady because you're kind of subconscious is kind of freaking out, and once you get past that, you'll be able to like stick your pin up there, and it's gonna move, but you're not so much really worried about where that pin's hovering over because it's constantly going back. It's constantly kind of going back, and it's just like if you're looking at that little X, it's like kind of a little bit below it, and it's just maybe doing like little figure eights just right within it. And as you're pulling back, and you're supposed to start focusing on the spot and not the pin so much, and you're pulling, and that's kind of how you get target panic. But like they literally like trying to bring that pin across and kind of time it is actually considered target panic, from my understanding.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Your body.
I thought target panic was when you crap your pants and vomit at the same time while fully drawn.
I'm really interested to see what happens if I get in front of an animal this year. Like on this bear hunt, I'm really interested to see if I freak out, because when we were scouting, and we got really a couple weeks, a month and a half ago, we were scouting and came across big old black bear. I mean, I can't imagine, like, I'm nervous about it because I freaked out just being close to one and not even trying to put a shot on one. I'm really interested to see how I perform. Like, time slowed down when we got close to that black bear.
Just ask Caleb about his water bottle.
Oh yeah, when you're in Montana.
Yeah, dude,
Yeah.
I got the hell out of there too. I mean, we definitely sound like Eastern hunters compared to like all those guys out there, but like, yeah, stuff's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is.
I mean, I went back and got it though. I had to.
Yeah. Why don't you?
I understand that.
Why don't you talk about that? We're still recording. People can hear about your story with the black bear and how big of a pussy you are, or a grizzly, whatever it was that you never saw.
So Scott, you tell the beginning of the story.
Yeah, so Caleb was upstream of me, and I had my dog Wendell, and we were probably 150, 200 yards downstream of Caleb, and I kept fishing closer to him as he fished upstream a little bit slower, and then all of a sudden I like just looked down. I'm like, kind of been checking the mud because I wanted to see a bear track. Finally see one, and I'm like, oh, that's cool, and I like took a few photos. And I yell up, I'm like, hey, Caleb. I was like, he didn't have a watch. So I was like, it's 9:15. I was like, I'm going back to camp. Like, oh, yeah, also, there's a huge bear track right here. So, all right, see you later. And he's like further away. And so I just started, it wasn't like I saw it and like turned tail, right? It was like I saw it and I was like, let's go back. And like, but to put that in context, like coming upstream on this like right side of the bank was like every bear hunting video I've ever seen. It was just like, I don't know that much about bears and dens and stuff, but like it was this high grass that had like something massive had been bedding in it, and then like this little cave area that like clearly something had been in there recently. Mm-hmm. And like there were all these like holes you could fall down in, and I was just like kept falling over, and I was like, all right, let's get the hell out of here. This sucks. And then Caleb, what happened?
So I catch like a fish, and then all right, I'll go back too. So I start walking back, and I take the same trail that he took because I wanted to see the bear print, and then I wanted to cross the stream where he crossed the stream. And so like I see the bear print, and I like start walking through the woods, and I'm like getting through what are kind of like these little like Christmas trees, right? That's what they look like, these pines. And I'm walking through, and I just stumble into this giant hole. I mean, just like head over heels, like fly rod goes into the trees, like
Yard sale.
Yeah, like you can hear like the fly rod reel ripping out line because like the line got caught in the trees, and it was like woo! As I'm like rolling into this thing, and I'm like looking at my dog, and he's like, dude, we got to get the hell out of here. And I was like, all right, yeah, like this is embarrassing. Like I'm all flustered. I'm thinking like this is where I go to die, you know, because there's a bear here. And so like I like grab my rod out of the tree, and like I'm like, all right, let's get out of here. And like as I'm like hauling ass out of there, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, if there's a place in this park where a bear is or lives, that's it.
Right.
That's the place. And so I'm like, man, that place is just kind of scary. And so like I walk like, maybe like 400 yards downstream, and I realize that my water bottle I don't have it.
And y'all are like super deep into the Bob Marshall, so it's not like you guys can.
Not like I can go get a new water bottle.
To give you context, when Caleb says park, he does not mean like, campsite, truck camping. We are like backcountry wilderness.
Yeah. It's I'm like sitting there, and I'm like, well, I've got this like Camelback.
It was your only water bottle, right?
It's my only. Yeah, well, I've got a Camelback that I hadn't been using. I'd been using the water bottle. And I'm like trying to weigh the consequences of just leaving the consequences, and I'm saying to myself, like, all right, well, I can just use the Camelback, and I'll use that for water to hike out of here. And then I was like, well, like, what am I gonna say to like Scott? Like, who, what am I gonna say if I come back and he's like, where's your water bottle? Why are you using the Camelback? And they're like, oh, I just like lost it or something. So like, anyways, I just basically decided, I was like, well, you can't not go back and get your water bottle because like somebody's gonna find out that you were too scared to walk to the bear den and get your shit. so I was like, I went over there, and I was like, I left the rod because I didn't want anything to,
get broken,
weigh me down. Ran back over there and went back into the hole and grabbed it.
Didn't you say it smelled like an animal in there?
Yeah, dude. It was like, like
weird.
The stars were aligned. That track was like less than a half day old.
Ooh.
It smelled weird, and it was like prime time for animal movement. It's like dusk.
Oh, yeah.
And there's like these like what look like places that are like rooted up the earth, and the grass was like belly button height, like waist high, and so you couldn't really see these like little rooted up areas that were like the size of a bear, and so you'd like fall down in one, and you'd be like, great, now it's gonna pounce on me.
Right.
Yeah.
Jesus. Yeah, that would freak me out.
Yeah, it was a bit like Ghost in the Darkness when those lions are like taking people out. Nobody knows
That's
what
what
is
Caleb's
going
thinking
on.
about when he's going for his water bottle.
Yeah, I'm like, I know how this ends.
Yeah.
I've seen this in a film.
That's hysterical.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. Having just a bow and arrow. I guess a black bear is a different story, but
Yeah,
I can understand why that'd be.
It's
not a small deal.
Like when we were scouting this up and we came across this black bear, he kind of was coming. We were on the side of a mountain in the backcountry, and like we look up and we see him, and he's kind of coming down the hill, like but maintaining kind of like the same distance from us. And then he's kind of curious. He's like looking to see, what's in this area. He knows that something's there, and then he sees us, and he kind of takes a few steps towards us. And at that time, it's like 30 yards. And when that happened, Matt and I both kind of get real big and like yell and scream. And he ran off. So after seeing that, like I'm not afraid of them,
Yeah.
but man, the scariest thing about it is like, okay, so we're in this super wooded area. There's branches on the ground everywhere, leaves. When we're walking through, it sounds like like a truck driving through the woods. It's impossible to not make noises. When he took off to run, the first step made noise, and that was it. And he was hauling ass. It was crazy how fast he was going, and it was like a ninja, man. When it was done, and I can't hear, so I was like, wow, maybe I just can't hear anything. But Matt was like, dude, that thing didn't make any noise. Like if you're getting charged and you're not paying attention, you don't know. Like you're done.
Game over.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty. That was
sounds like an unsuccessful scouting mission because now the bear's not going to go back where you found him.
Dude, there are so many bears.
I'm just kidding.
There are so many bears on that side of the mountain. It's crazy. We just found a ton of bear sign. I'm fired up about it.
That's how that wolf was, man. When I saw that wolf, I was fishing out in Montana. Like a wolf just walked down the bank and started drinking, and I'm like, oh, I've got to get my phone. So like, try to pull up my phone. He just looks at me, like turns around, and just kind of trots off. I went chasing after him to see if I could find him, like right after him to go up on the bank.
Mm-hmm.
And dude, I probably wasn't, more than 15 to 25 seconds behind him.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just gone. Like I had, just disappeared.
Wow.
And it wasn't like it was open. It wasn't like it was like wooded or anything either. It was like kind of open.
We're in a valley where it was pretty open.
He was just gone.
That's crazy. What kind of wolf was it? Do you know?
Just a gray wolf.
Really?
Dude, I looked that up after we ran into the Forest Service guys, and they were like, so some context. There was like 5 Forest Service guys. One was like clearly the leader, and then he had like 3 grunts and like this other dude that was like, maybe like middle management, for lack of a better terminology. And like this dude that like clearly had been in the woods the most was like, yeah, I've like seen one once, and everyone else is like, I've never seen a wolf. And so I got back and Googled it, and there's like only 1,300 of them in like those 3 different states, I think.
Really?
Unless I looked at like a figure that's way off. Yeah. Let's see.
That's pretty cool then, dude. You got to see something.
Yeah, like from a statistical standpoint, dude, like very low percentage chance.
Was it big?
I just thought, it was big. I just don't understand why, like a lot of people are like, oh, they're so beautiful. The first thing I thought of was like, man, I wish I could shoot this thing. But apparently they have a really liberal season. Like you can kill 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alaska's like very aggressive about it.
Is it just 1,300 gray wolves, or is there? I guess there's timber wolves there too that you can. I mean, I know there's like a wolf problem in parts of the country.
I don't know if it was a gray wolf or a timber wolf. It was gray though. It was a gray wolf.
I got you. I don't even know.
If my understanding is that the timber wolf's a different deal, and those are like very few. But there's black and gray wolves, and they're basically the same thing. Was my understanding. They call it the gray wolf. I think it's kind of like, you get your Labrador Retriever, and you get 3-4 different colors of the same deal.
Right. Gotcha. Man, that's cool.
I remember looking at it was like Idaho, Montana. There was like, I remember seeing the numbers, and I was like, there's not very many of these things, I could be way off with that number. I remember it was like,
you could probably Google like wolf population Bob Marshall Wilderness, find some sort of metric for it.
I remember I heard something on one of Ranello's podcasts about like taking him off the endangered species list, and he mentioned some database or like a website, and I went there, and it was like instantly gave me the info.
Yeah. Randy Newberg has been fighting to get him off because the reintroduction has been like super successful, and some states they're like having issues with it where like the wolves are just jacking up the elk population. And the crazy thing about wolves is they kill for sport. So they'll just chase a herd of elk
Yeah.
and just knock them down.
Well, dude.
Yeah, here we go. 2014 December, the wolf population was estimated in Yellowstone, which is like
Not far.
I think 2 million acres.
Mm-hmm.
Touching like what is it? 3 different states. It's definitely 2.
Yeah. 3.
11 packs of wolves for a grand total of 104 wolves in all of Yellowstone.
Really?
104. Yeah, dude. The numbers are like. I remember it was like Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and it was like 1,300.
Dang.
And if there's a 104 in Yellowstone and you want to just multiply that out, 1,300 sounds very reasonable for that much more.
Yeah.
Dude, my buddy, he's from Wyoming. He wrote this paper about taking grizzlies off the endangered species list in those states, and like.
You mean wolves? Or wait, are grizzlies on the?
Grizzlies are on there in those states. Wolves are off in Idaho and Montana. They're still on in Wyoming.
Yeah.
And that's what the governor was like. Hey, we don't. The governor of Wyoming was like, they basically told Wyoming they don't like their plan to manage wolves.
Yeah.
So he says that, like, he hunts too, and he was like, I'm not like against taking the grizz off of the endangered species list, but he's like, in all honesty, it really helps us to have those grizzlies on the endangered species list, because the thing that keeps the national forest from like contracting out to miners
is the fact that those grizzlies are on.
And they can't touch the habitat. So he was like, if it's like comes down to it, it's better to keep those bears on there.
That's interesting.
Than it is to hunt them.
You lose a few elk and deer to keep the land.
Yeah.
Easy.
And he said basically, it's funny because the guy on that podcast that we were listening to of Wyoming, the governor of Wyoming has made it into, because he wants to get them off so that he can have like oil companies and mining companies go in there, and it just boosts all the economy around those national forests, right?
Yeah. It's that like green decoy, but in reverse concept.
Yeah.
Is that
so
the guy that was on Renella's podcast?
Yeah. And so he says the governor has painted like this bear and wolf thing as like basically like, getting people fired up about hunting them. Like saying, we have the right, these are our animals, are the state's animals. We have the right to manage and hunt them. What he really wants is them off the list so that he can get I'm not saying that this is like true, because obviously I don't know the guy and I don't know his motives. Right. But like, that's like,
there's potential for a very serious hidden agenda there, and it's an easy sell the way he's positioning it.
I wonder. I feel like Ranella would be all over something like that, but I would love to hear what he has to say about something.
I mean, this
like
guy's
that.
going to get this paper published, and once he, gives me the okay to send it out, he told me not to send it out to anyone. Once he gives me the okay to send it out, I'll send it to you guys.
Wow. Is it like an academic paper?
Yeah, I mean, he's a law student, so he knows how to write, and he's basically he's studying solely environmental law.
Oh wow.
He's not a
biologist with a peer-reviewed journal paper, but he's gone through the process.
From a legality.
Yeah. It's going to get published. It's just a matter of time.
Right.
Like his professor, one of his professors is going to look at it and look it over, and I'll probably.
I trust a lawyer to do that more than a biologist, because it really harps on one key skill that all lawyers have, and that's digging dirt on people.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. The
That's something I want to start talking about in this podcast, and I've been like holding off from it because I feel like I don't want to bring people straight in. Yeah, I don't want to bring people straight into like the conservation stuff, especially the waterfowl, East Coast, Southeast. It's not when people think of conservation, they think of hippies, and liberals and Obama. But that's one thing I want to start introducing this population to is like the idea of conservation and public land management. It's not something that you can just paint as like liberal and hippie. It's really conservative in a lot of ways. And, it's just the spin on it is different. And I'd be interested. I'm trying to find a tactful way of doing that without, because I want people to start watching the podcast and not be like turned off from what seemingly sounds like political hippie nonsense at first glance.
I think you make it relatable from like all three of us. Where did we start hunting, right?
Public land.
Yeah. Do you want there to be more or less of that? And it's like, well, if the answer is yes, here's the implications for that now and in the future.
Right. I agree.
But and that's I think what's hard about politics in our country right now is it's like everyone attempts to make a lot of very complex issues very black and white, and we're living in the gray area with most stuff.
Right.
Yeah. And you can't oversimplify a complex issue.
No, you can't.
And they don't have simple solutions.
No, it's incredibly complex. I'll be interested. I'm going to try to find a good guest to bring in and talk about that. It's like something that no one ever talks about in duck hunting. People talk about Ducks Unlimited, I guess, but you never hear like the celebrity duck hunters like truly talk about what Ducks Unlimited is doing. And in a lot of like aspects, there's like negative connotations. Some people are like, oh, I'm a Delta waterfowl guy, or I'm a Ducks Unlimited guy. It's like, Ducks Unlimited is trying to screw us over in this way or something. I feel like there's a lot of misinformation in general. I'm going to try to get some people on to really settle that, hopefully, and educate people on what the mission statements really are and what they're really doing.
Yeah. I was thinking about that personally. I went to a committee meeting here in Atlanta last week, and like one of the guys was like, I've never even killed ducks, and like, it just seemed like, they weren't as much in it for like conservation and approaching it from like a hardcore duck hunter perspective. And I like had to like really take a minute and think about like, all right, so if these dudes are doing it for like the 2 or 3 parties that you get to throw a year and like the cool auction and the social aspect, I was like, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Right. And it's like, I don't know, but it raises a bunch of money for what I think is probably a good cause.
Yeah.
But it's also furthering the sport in a direction that I don't know is in its best interest. And so it's like,
it just depends on how much influence they have over the greater mission. I mean, you go to the headquarters in Memphis and it's a bunch of hunters, Yeah. So they're the guys that are really making the decisions. The biologists.
And they need money.
Yeah.
And if it comes from those events, then that's
cool.
that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care. Like, I think it's an opportunity too to educate non-hunters on what hunting's about. And it's like, we don't just shoot our animals and let them fucking swim. Rot in the water. We take them home and feed ourselves and our families with that. And there's like a larger point to be made. And this like, I really think, like a lot of guys like Ranella and Randy Newberg and other folks that I listen to kind of make an argument that I think we're in a state of flux right now where it's like we could lose. I could see a potential of losing our ability to hunt. You know, like, and within like a generation, if we don't play the game right, you know, like maybe not in our lifetime, but maybe during our kids' lifetime. And so what that means is that you have to educate the people that are in between. Like, it's not like you don't really care about what the anti-hunter is. Like, the hunters make up 5% of the population, and anti-hunters make up 5% of the population. What you care about is the middle, and educating that middle ground and showing them that we're not a bunch of Bubba rednecks, and that we're articulate, and there's a lot of reasons about why we do the things that we do, and a lot of those reasons are, and a lot of those actions that we take are really good things, like the Pittman-Robertson Act. Like, our money's what funds conservation for the most part, what funds the biologists that are on staff with the different states. And
there's also the idea that, like, as far as, like, these downtown daddies and their DU events, like, they're raising a ton of money. Sure, maybe it's not like a big issue in the sense that, like, it's not furthering the sport, but, like, the only way when you study, like, conservation and law, like, the big thing that everybody harps on is, like, public involvement. Mm-hmm. And, like, you have to get public involvement or stuff never happens.
Right.
Right. And so, like, if getting a bunch of downtown daddies together to go spend their money at a DU event.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I think it is an awareness game too. Like, when Josh talks about, like, the middle of the road people, like, I've met a lot of, like, very moderately oriented folks that have been like, oh yeah, like, they'll just, like, ask, it's like last year when I was in business school, you talk to people that don't know anything about hunting but are moderate, and they'd be like, oh, what do you think about assault weapons? I'd be like, what do you think? And they'd be like, well, I'm against them because I don't think that a gun that can shoot rapid fire should be legal. Yeah. And I'd be like, dude, that's not what an assault weapon is. That's a machine gun that's been illegal for a really long time.
Right.
But it's like, it speaks to the broader theme of, like, you got a lot of people that I think would easily be for hunting if they just, like, knew what it was.
Right.
Because they're misinformed in a lot of cases.
Well, I think there's also, like, the idea too that, like, when you see, like, the Outdoor Channel, maybe it was, or what's the hunting channel?
Outdoor Network.
Outdoor Network.
Then there's the other one that Renella's on that I don't think any cable providers provide, which is frustrating.
I thought they were owned by the same people. I thought they were the same thing, Sportsman's and Outdoor. I thought it was like the same thing or something.
I've never had access to anything other than Outdoor Channel.
Huh.
Like, even on the list of, like, options when I'm, like, picking my package, being like, all right, priority number 1, outdoor shows. And then it's like, I only got one option. I didn't even know there was a second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the Outdoor Channel, I think those hunting shows are a huge problem. Like, a lot of them are, like, you got, like, jokers like Michael Waddell walking around, is completely unarticulate. All they show is a kill shot. They don't show anything else about the hunt, and that's what people see, And I know that I'm probably just pissed off if I was to put this on the podcast, which I might leave it in. I would just pissed off like 300,000 Michael Waddell fans. But I mean, you get associated with the lowest common denominator, Yeah. Like, if you're on Instagram posting, like, ridiculous pictures where you spray painted a hog to look like a Pokemon that you shot, and
did that happen?
Yes, and I've commented on it. I commented on the picture, and I was just like, man, do you realize you're doing yourself a disservice by just looking like a jackass? And it's like, I know you don't give a fuck what the PETA people think. No one cares what PETA thinks because they're a bunch of crazy.
They're in that 5%.
They're the lowest common denominator of the other side, right? Yeah. Our lowest common denominator are the people that shoot hogs and paint them like Pokemon. The other side is PETA. they're the same people on both sides. You have to present yourself well and show that you're
reasonable.
a socially responsible human being, and that you have a soul. And just posting awful looking animals that are dead on Instagram is not a great way of preserving our right to hunt, because you're only going to turn people off from it. You got, I mean, you could take the grip and grin pick, but make sure that the animal's not covered in blood. The gritty bowman guys always talk about this. Make sure the tongue's not hanging out. Make the animal look like you harvested it in an ethical way and it was painless, and don't make it look awful. Don't make it look like a horror movie, like a Saw 2. And
yeah. But even then, dude, it's like, I told my girlfriend this the other day. I was like, why do you think wild game's like not as like clean or whatever? Like, what's your deal? Like, why would you rather eat a chicken? Long story short. Mm-hmm. She's like, well, it's just like it's cleaner. I was like, that in those chicken killing facilities, like Tyson specifically, the biggest brand, there's like a low 70% success rate on like the hacker machine. Yeah. And so like there's a dude whose like sole occupational deal is he like comes around with a separate little handheld hacker and like finishes off that like remaining 26% that like didn't get hacked right. Yeah. That's just like side hack or whatever. I'm like, we're at dinner and I'm making all these hacking motions, and she's obviously extremely upset with me by this point. But I was like, so tell me how that's like cleaner. And she's like, okay, like I get it.
Dude, I used to be in the food industry, right? And I was in the high-end organic sustainability, hippie high-end meat food, right? And I've been to those places. It's not pretty, man. Like, it's not a way that you would want an animal. It's certainly not the way I would want to go out. It's basically like you're going into a concentration camp and you're just being forced through these gates, and it's a high-stress environment. The animals are stressed out. And then the cows get it the best. The cows get it the best for sure, because it's just a pneumatic pin that goes into its head and it drops every single time. But yeah, the chickens are on a freaking conveyor belt upside down.
Yeah. Dude, I've seen that. Dude, you know what I told her? I was like, dude, this is like a kind of a dick thing to say, but I was like, would you rather have a guy making $8 to $12 an hour take your food from living to package to your belly, or have a guy with a master's degree do it? I was like, I mean, that to me says all right there. It's like, just picture some dude with like that's killing his 1,000th animal that day.
Yeah.
Or like me, who's like meticulous, plucking every feather, like making sure there's no shot in it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And that animal that you harvest hunting had an amazing life, whereas that chicken was stuck in a cage its entire life. That it never moved. It never even turned to its right. It never even turned to its right. It's literally just boxed in like that, getting antibiotics and a shit ton of corn shoved in it. Or eating, just shitting through a grate. And then it hits a certain peak weight. They all hit a certain peak weight at the same time, and they just clear that lot, and then it's like the next ones are raised, and they grow up in that little spot. They grow up in like a little cage. They don't even turn around. It's crazy.
And then little Timmy and Terrence, they get trampled,
Yeah.
And that's how their life ends.
Yeah. So you're harvesting like an animal that had a great life, minus like dodging foxes and other hunters. But
people just see a shiny package on the shelf, same way they do with those hunting shows you're talking about, and it's like the news, right? You just get a headline, and then the details are what's important. Hell, I got in an argument 2 days ago about the Duke lacrosse team. I was like, yeah, those guys, like, dude, that was awful what they did. And he was like, no, you moron. Like, they all were acquitted, and Duke settled with like 30 of them.
Yeah,
dude,
really?
That lawyer that lawyer lost his job and might spend time in jail.
But like, if you're like only getting the headlines and not like really trying to understand the facts, like you're easily misled. You know,
Yeah.
Me included.
Yeah.
But highly recommend that 30 for 30 on ESPN called Fantastic Lies. It's good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, they were all innocent, right?
No, dude, it was like way deeper than like innocent. It was like everything they said was true. Like, yes, did they have like a frat party and hired 2 strippers? We can debate the morality of that, certainly. But like, dude, back like 6 years after that happened in 2012, the lady that accused him of that murdered her boyfriend. Straight up. Yeah, she's in prison now because she murdered her boyfriend and had like previous to the Duke case, like a long history of mental issues.
Wow.
And they like found DNA and the DA he withheld this information from the DNA test and actually served prison time for doing this.
Yeah.
And was disbarred. But they found DNA, so they did the DNA test and only showed the results as it pertained to the Duke lacrosse team. Mm-hmm. What they didn't share until like way later on, after the news cameras had gone out of the way, was that 11 other specimens from different men not on the Duke lacrosse team were found on and inside her. And like, they're saying that like one of those Duke guys somehow raped her. And then they checked the phone records, and it was like she said she was in the bathroom for 30 minutes getting raped by 3 guys that she was asked to pick from a lineup that only had Duke lacrosse players in it. And then they checked the phone records, and based on the calls from those 3 guys and her phone, like less than 7 minutes of time existed where that could have even happened. And the time that she said it happened, 2 of them had already fobbed into their dorm room.
Really?
It was like not only was it like their story panned out, it was like they were 110% innocent beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Like, what happened to those guys? Because it's like they got kicked out of school, didn't they? They
got like reinstated after a year, and I think graduated and got a ton of money from the school for not sticking up for them, and like the damages incurred by ruining like whatever you want to call like a lacrosse career.
Yeah, that
like
that and like you go into a job interview and somebody might remember that name. Oh, you're one of the Duke lacrosse guys. Oh yeah, I'm not hiring you. Yeah. Jesus.
The guy I sit next to played at UNC. He was their goalie. And I was like giving him shit about the Duke lacrosse team. He's like, "Listen, asshole, watch this 30 for 30." And I did, and I was like, "Damn, like I gotta not pay attention to headlines ever again."
Yeah, it was bad.
Did y'all watch that OJ thing? The 30 for 30, like the 3-part series on OJ?
There was like a mini series. Was there also an ESPN deal on it?
Yeah, and it's supposed to be insane. I haven't seen it, but the people I've heard talk about it and like how crazy OJ was, and like it's just supposed to be they're like, people say like you think you know the OJ case, and you just don't know the OJ case.
Huh.
Yeah. Pretty crazy. He had a really good legal team.
No, hey, I'm gonna go grab some to eat. I haven't eaten dinner yet.
All right, take it.
All
right, guys. We'll see you. Thanks,
Scott.
Yeah, man.
Yep. See you, Scott.